Hello, and welcome to the Center for Jewish History. I'm delighted that you're all here for this month's Family History Today lecture, doing research on and in Prussian Poland. My name is Jenny Rappaport, and I'm the head genealogist at the Ackman and Ziff Family Genealogy Institute. The Center for Jewish History provides a collaborative home for 5 in-house partner organizations, which together form the largest archive on the modern Jewish experience outside of Israel. In addition, the center houses the Ackman and Ziff Family Genealogy Institute, where I work, where we assist people, whether Jewish or non-Jewish, with researching their family history. Because time is of the essence, the Genealogy Institute has recently shifted our focus to helping Holocaust survivors and their direct descendants. We are currently working with the Claims Conference on our Histories and Mysteries Social Impact Project, which aims to use archival research and personal stories to bring closure to families who have lingering Holocaust-era mysteries. We feature the research process and the mystery itself in video form. If you have a mystery in your own family, please fill out our form on CJH's website. It's www.cjh.org, histories-mysteries. You can also access the form by going to www.cjh.org, clicking on the little menu, and scrolling down to the Genealogy Institute section. It's very clearly marked Histories and Mysteries. We remain open to the general public on Mondays from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., when our experienced genealogy staff is happy to assist researchers of all experience levels with their research. No appointments are needed on Mondays. Any questions and comments during this program can be submitted at any time by using the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. Please note that our guest speaker will only answer your questions during the dedicated Q&A portion at the end of the program. We do not have the chat feature enabled for this webinar. It's just Q&A. If you'd like to view the closed captions for this program, please click on the closed caption button on the bottom of your screen and then click Show Subtitles. This program will be recorded. Please note that we do correct the auto captions for all of our program videos, so it typically takes us a few weeks to post them online. Once the video is online, you'll receive an email with the link to watch it. And finally, I am thrilled today to introduce our speaker, Roger Lustig. Roger is a genealogical researcher based in Princeton, New Jersey. Since 2002, he has specialized in the Jewish families of Prussian Poland, especially Upper Silesia and West Prussia. He has done research in archives in the US, Germany, and Poland. As the research coordinator for Jewish Gen's Germany Research Division, he is developing databases, including NALDEX, which stands for Name Adoption List Index, the Württemberg Family Registers, and the Hessen-Gottermann database. He has also contributed over 40,000 Prussian records to the JRI Poland database, for which he is the Prussian Poland Area Coordinator. He has given presentations at 14 International Association of Jewish Genealogical Society conferences, as well as scholarly conferences in Germany and Poland, and various genealogical societies in the US and Canada. He moderates the JurSig group on Facebook and is one of the 3 administrators of the Tracing the Tribe group on Facebook, which is one of the largest Jewish genealogy groups out there. There's 80,000 people and change. And now I am very happy to pass the mic and the screen over to Roger. And if you want to share your screen with us, we can get started.
Um, Okay, does that look right?
It does. I can see it
Good,
says Researching the Jews of Prussian Poland.
excellent. First, a slight update. There are 4 moderators for Tracing the Tribe again. We have just added Barbara Zimmer to our staff of enthusiasts. And I hope all of you are members of Tracing the Tribe. It's a great place to ask a question that perhaps 1 out of 80,000 people might know the answer to.
I have personally found it helpful as well, I'd just like to say.
What you're looking at is what you can download at this URL, and this is the handout and the slides. So if you'd like to download it now or later, it's going to be there. And if there are things that come up during the talk that I feel ought to be mentioned, I will add them as an appendix to this later on. So uh, check in often. So Prussian Poland. This is one of my favorite maps. It's it shows where Jews lived in Northern Europe and in what concentrations. The Eastern Poland and Western Belarus and Ukraine. You notice that that's all the way on the right of the map. That's dark brown or something like that. That's 13 to 18% Jewish. Red is the next level down, 9 to 13%. And west of that is Germany. And the highest concentrations there, you get to the blue levels, which is somewhere between 2 and 4% Jewish. All told, given the population of Prussian Poland then, or for that matter, at any other time, we are talking about a group of people, a group of Jews that never numbered more than about 150,000 total. So this is compared to the 3 million Jews in Poland between the wars. That's a very small number. I'm thrilled to see a great turnout today for for this highly specialized talk. Here's another view of things. These are the administrative districts that make up Prussian Poland. Basically, Prussian Poland is everything to the east of the crease on the map that you see there, toward the left. And now I'm going to go through the different pieces of Prussian Poland in case, well, just to cover the geography a little bit more closely. Here's a picture of Poland today, the gray parts. The dotted line is Poland between the wars, and to the west of that, a C-shaped piece on the left. That was Prussian Poland between the wars, and then at top middle, where it says Russia, and below, that was also Prussian Poland between the wars. Where it says Russia, that's part of Prussian Poland that Russia appropriated for itself after World War II. Nothing like having a nice protected Baltic Sea port, and they figured that they might as well help themselves to one. Here's a representation of what came from where. The red parts were Prussian Poland before World War I, but not after. And, well, you notice the outline of Poland that you saw on the previous map. Another thing about Prussian Poland is that it was Poland. Prussia had held only certain parts of it before the late 18th century, when they and the Russians and the Austrians divvied up Poland and sort of wiped it off the map as an as a nation, I guess, a nation state. And yet here you see that this is part of Prussian Poland, West Prussia and Posen, where if you go back to that previous map, you'll see that that's the highest concentration of Jews in the region. But you also have the high concentrations of Polish-speaking people. The Jews in this area were German-speaking. The Poles were, to a vast extent, Catholic, and did not view themselves in any way as being German or Prussian. And yes, there was a difference. Nowadays, there's lots and lots to be researched, and lots of materials to support that. And here is a representation of where there are Polish state archives that have records of interest to us. Fortunately, they're online, and some of their interfaces even in English. And otherwise, you just use the translate feature in Google or however you like to do it, and you'll get a general idea of what's available to you. If you're researching a particular town, the simplest thing to do is simply enter the name of the town and search on that. Nowadays, they have arranged it so that vital records and things like that come up first in the result. For instance, I put in Myslovice, which is the town at the corner where Prussia and Austria and Russia met. There's one spot on the map where that happens. And here we see that there are, excuse me, there are vital records available. Mojizovce is Jewish records. Below there are Catholic records, and so on. The sidebar that you saw here on the left is rather long. I've folded it up here, and you can see all the different options you can exercise to find what you're looking for. Jewish, Lutheran, Roman Catholic, or civil records down the middle, and then below that births, deaths, marriages, and allegata, I guess, marriage annexes. Regions, town names, which archives things came from, and which date ranges you're interested in. Once you have, it's kind of daunting to come across this website at first, but it does work pretty well. If you can't get to Poland, Poland can come to you in various ways on the internet, such as Genealogy Poland, which is where most of the vital records from Prussian Poland that have been transcribed or extracted or indexed have been kept. If you go to Jewish Gen and search for somebody who turns out to be in Prussian Poland, this will come up too. Not to worry. And if anybody would like to help index or transcribe or otherwise create materials for JRI Poland to display, please let me know. If you happen to be near the Center for Jewish History or a major university library, you'll be able to find a book with this title, Sources for the History of Jews in Polish Archives, 2 volumes. The first volume is Everywhere Except Silesia, and the second volume is Silesia. This is an inventory taken by graduate students shortly after the wall came down and people were able to go to Poland and work more easily in the archives. And even though it's old-fashioned in that it's paper, it's still pretty useful and it's nicely indexed. If you're looking for a particular person and they found Judaica relating to a particular person, it should be in there. Back to Prussia and Polish Prussia. Maybe Prussian Poland. Prussia was sort of the big dog in the German Empire that Bismarck created, and the eastern part of that, to the east of that black line, most of which is the Oder River, is what we're talking about here, Prussian Poland. It's 3 provinces and pieces of pieces or most of three others. East Prussia is the original Prussia. Long ago, 1,000 years ago, there were actually people there, a race called, or the tribe called Prussians. And Prussian history pretty much begins with other other forces coming in and decimating the Prussians. So actual Prussians, there aren't any, but they called it that. This is the whole map here is showing Prussia before World War One. The blue line near the top is part that was ceded mostly to Lithuania after World War One, and the red line shows where the rest got split between Russia and Poland after World War Two. I'm not going to go through these in detail. Feel free to read them afterwards in the copy of these slides that you've downloaded or that you simply access here. West Prussia, which is almost deceptively known as West Prussia, even though it's almost as far east as you can get in Prussia. It was also divided after World War One. The Polish corridor, see here in the middle, was given to Poland so that Poland would actually have access to the sea. And after World War One, Dansk nowadays, was made a free city that didn't belong to anybody, and that, well, eventually belonged to Nazi Germany again, and so on. The part to the west or the east of the blue lines, depending, remained German after World War One. Pomerania is split between today's Germany and today's Poland. Not a huge population of Jews there, about 1% at most. But then again, there was also 1% Catholics. So Jews didn't have to feel singled out in that regard. Plenty of minorities to go around. Again, another place where not a lot of Jews lived was the eastern part of Brandenburg. Huge numbers of Jews lived to the west of that in Berlin. About a quarter of Germany's Jews lived right there. But various towns in the eastern part, the Neumark, the new border country, most towns had a small Jewish community. After the Napoleonic Wars, before which Prussia had held most of what's today's Poland, their boundaries were rolled back to most of what they had taken in the Second Polish Partition in the late 1790s. And Poznan had the highest concentration of Jews. In fact, when Poznan became part of Prussia, I think it more than doubled the number of Jews in Prussia at all. It was also not as at first after Prussia took it over officially in 1815. It was sort of held at arm's length, sort of like Puerto Rico. It was not a province of Prussia, but rather a grand duchy with separate laws and separate rules. and a Grand Duke who happened also to be the king. And oh, finally, there is Silesia. This is where my father's family comes from. It had the largest city in Prussian Poland, named Breslau. Now it is Wrocław. And after World War One, the eastern bit got assigned to the new Poland after a great deal of trouble. Uh, to a great extent, this was because that way Poland wound up with some very nice steel mills. This being the original uh, German coal and steel location, long before the Ruhr Valley had anything to say about it. So now I'm going to show you a little about what vital records look like in terms of if you're going to be researching either online or uh, or in person. Most of what you're going to want is online, fortunately. It's just the one that you want isn't. That's been my experience. Universal civil registration in Prussia began October of 1874. And this meant that church books were no longer legal documents that they had been before. It also meant that Jews did not have to have special arrangements to have their vital records uh, kept. Before 1874, the county courts had done this, and before 1847, the Jewish communities and the towns together had managed the vital registers. But here, everybody was put into the same pot, which is great for administrative purposes, but not so great for number purposes because, as I said, it's a small percentage of the population. And unless you have one of those, you're working with one of those registers that happens to have an index, you may have an awful lot of flipping through pages to do to find that 1% that's Jewish and the 1% of that's your family. Here's an example of a birth record, the one I was showing on the previous page. And here's all the information you get in it. These are very nice in terms of their contents. And of course, when we're working on the German genealogy, the first problem is the handwriting. German had its own script called Kurrentschrift, which is no longer in use, thank goodness, but which looks quite different from Latin script that you might find in our country or Italy, France, just about anywhere else. Fortunately for us, they put names. You can see Valerie Lewinsky there at the top, and places, Ortelsburg right there, middle on the left, and dates, August, all in Latin letters, which is very kind of them. So you can get at least half of the information you were hoping for without having to read too much in the way of the Kurrentschrift. It's not as hard as it looks, by the way. One does get used to it. It's a lot easier than learning Cyrillic. Here's another example. This is a marriage record. It's broken up into two pieces, him and her. The bridegroom is number one. The bride is number two, Sophie Cohn, marrying Jacob Engel up above. And again, here's a close-up of all the things you get. And the important thing here is that you get the parents of both bride and groom, including are they alive? And if so, where are they living? And if not, what was their last place of residence? This can get you a goodly distance toward uh, for the information you're seeking. As I mentioned, you may have to flip through entire volumes to find two or three records. And what you're looking for when you're flipping through is this bit here where it says religion, and it's preceded by which religion it is. Just for fun, the Prussian authorities, the German authorities, used at least four different terms for Jewish in these. So you have to have your eyes peeled for well, two or three of them certainly. And they are unfortunately in current shrift, so you just have to get used to what those four words look like. Jewish, Israelite, Mosaic, or Old Testamentarian. My favorite, but also the rarest. Before that, in the middle of the century, Prussian vital records for Jews and non-established religions, Baptists, for instance. These were kept by county courts, were kept in the same general style, everything in one great big sentence. As you could see here, this is all, the form is all set up so that everything is stated in one long sentence. They did that there too, but without a form. So that meant that most of the information you might find on one of the later ones, one of the printed ones, such as you just saw, might still be there, but on the other hand, it might not. And in certain portions of the period that this was used, the 25 years or so, uh, very, very little information was actually conveyed. Here's an example. You can see how gorgeous it looks compared to the printed versions. And here's a close up. You can see this. It's much shorter than that one. The one long sentence isn't nearly as long. And you can see what it says down below. It just says these two people from these places have declared that they want to get married, and that's it. No parents, no ages, no places of birth, nothing like that. But they did continue with that. They did already use that convention whereby names and dates and places were slightly easier for us nowadays to read. Before that, as I mentioned, each municipality kept its own Jewish record. And, excuse me, and the styles were far more variable still than what you got in the later period. Here's one of the most detailed registers, a birth register that I have seen. Fortunately, it's from my dad's hometown, so uh, at least our family we've been able to research pretty well. Uh, Down on the left, you'll notice that the source of this is two different films. I will be describing these films a little later on, but for now, let's just say that the left-hand pages and the right-hand pages are on different reels. So if you want to look at these online, which you can, you'd have two windows open as you scroll through and keep track very carefully of which page is which. And here's one line from one of those. You can see how detailed this stuff is. We have dates and given names and the parents and the parents' occupation, and the names of the godparents or witnesses. Evidently, godparents were a thing in certainly in Prussian administered Jewish life at that point. And we even get the name of the mohel, which you don't get in later uh, uh, later styles of record. But you can see here at the bottom, there's a whole lot being expressed. So I mentioned those two films on opposite side on two different reels. Again, if you're going to use online materials, the number one source for that is the films in the collections of familysearch.org. In the 1930s, the Nazis wanted to have a central registry of genealogy so they could figure out exactly who was Jewish, who wasn't Jewish, and who was not Jewish enough or too Jewish for whatever it was they were going to administer and however. So they went out and filmed vital registers, including church books, including Jewish records, anything before the civil registration came in. And for about 5 years, they did this. And then they realized that they had underestimated the scale of the project. They had gotten maybe 5 to 10% of what they had wanted to photograph, and realized that it was going to take them an awful lot more time and an awful lot more personnel. And then the war started, and the whole thing was shelved. So everything you saw before that, other than the civil records, were from these films. And there are some further registers like these that aren't filmed or that are online elsewhere, but this is the bulk of them. With the Holocaust underway and Germany having been pretty much scoured of Jews, the Nazis decided to gather up the Jewish records, the records that Jewish communities had held, and make a database out of those, or make a collection of films out of those. And anyway, these were filmed, not necessarily in very good, not necessarily filmed very well. Now all of these films are available at the all these certainly for pardon me, for Prussian Poland and for Eastern Germany. They're all available at familysearch.org, either online or at the library in Salt Lake City. And for a small minority of those where privacy concerns actually still obtain, that they have to follow German law in displaying them. So about 10% of the Prussian Poland records are not online. This is totally hit or miss. Some places, this is the number one source. For other places, you have 3 years of synagogue seating certificates, and that's it. They basically took what they could, or stole what they could, depending on how you'd like to look at it, had it filmed, and then, unfortunately, at the end of the war, filming does seem to have been completed, but shortly after the end of the war, quite by accident, the originals were lost. Nobody's sure exactly how that happened, but there's enough testimony that it did happen. And so the Gotterman films, whatever their quality, are for many places all that we've got. Now, if you so far I've worked back to 1812, which is when Prussia's Jews were many of Prussia's Jews were emancipated and actually naturalized as Prussian citizens. Before that, Jews were considered as a separate, Jewish communities were considered very much a separate entity, and annual tables of annual censuses basically were kept to track uh, not only the names of Jews, but also their occupations, their net worth, the business they were in, and all the other items pertaining to the fact that Jews were considered not so much fellow citizens, but rather as economic engines for making making the economies there possible. So those are the different types of records that we've got. Now, here's where to find them. For Prussian Poland, there is, or Eastern Prussian provinces, as they're also named, Ancestry.com has indexed and put online an enormous collection of post 1874 records. These are duplicate registers from, well, from the various places in Prussian Poland. Uh, that is to say, if both copies of a register were kept, the Poles gave the second copy to uh, the West Germans, and starting about 15 years ago, they started indexing these, and this is an amazing collection. Some towns are completely covered. So 1874 onward, uh, there are several substantial towns of substantial size that have 100% coverage. If it's not in there, it's never been in there. Others are totally missing, and in yet others, say Breslau, it's entirely hit or miss. Breslau's archive, Prussian archive, was the central source for a great deal of Prussian Poland's history. And unfortunately, in the last days of World War II, it got flattened. About 80% loss. And what's left of these these post 1874 registers is full of holes. There are gaps. There may be 3-year stretches, and then 1 month in the next 5 years, and then in any combination you could imagine. And again, what's indexed here is only what has survived in 2 copies. There's much more online. The Breslau has, I believe, put all of their vital records of this kind online. And they represent what you can find at Ancestry plus some more. But how much more and where is difficult. Some of the collection found in Wrocław nowadays has been indexed by JRI Poland for Breslau. Genealogy seems to be popular in Poland, and one of the nicest things that's come out of that is the so-called Poznan project, where a huge team of volunteers index church books and then the civil vital records from the province of Poland, Posen, pardon me, and a few areas to the north and to the east. And this is a very nice database online. I'm not going to go into great detail on how to use it, but at any rate, this is where to find it. And and they did the right thing by starting with marriages because you get 6 people per record. Over at MyHeritage, we have the German minority census of 1939, which pretty much shows the Jewish population, or Jewish and people with Jewish ancestors population of Germany at the time. It's not extremely extensive in the information that you find on each card, but it would seem to be more or less complete for the regions that for which it has survived, which is most of them. As I mentioned, the Poles are hard at work, and here's uh, another effort here, the Genetica, similar to the Posen project, but covering all of Poland and not just marriages. A huge project. Again, what you'll find here is hit or miss. And for Jewish records, it's almost entirely those from 1874 and onward. The Polish State Archives have a lot of their vital records, a lot of these things online uh, for you to view. Almost all of them accessible through the portal that I showed you earlier, the Polish State Archives site. For 2 archives, however, from Prussian Poland, there's a separate site. It's called Genealogy in the Archives and has the records from 2 of the archives in, well, Braunburg was the eastern end of Posen, and Torin was the southeastern part of West Prussia, not far from one another. It is not easy to use, unfortunately. I'd show you an example. I'd show you a screenshot of what it looked like, but um, well, it's kind of chaotic. Just leave it at that, I guess. Another totally autonomous initiative was a group of genealogists in Upper Silesia who went with their phones, I guess, their digital cameras and their phones, and photographed register upon register of stuff that wasn't yet online otherwise. And this is easily downloadable from the site here. And that's been a godsend for those of us who work in that area, stuff that we had been aching to see for a long time. Some of it had been partly put online at Family Search long, long ago, but even that got cut off because Poland had a rule about not putting online anything more under 100 years old of this kind. And these films were made in 1970. So the last 4 years were always cut off. We don't have to deal with that anymore, thanks to these kind folks. By the way, for all of the last few that I've shown, again, these are volunteers and they do take donations, and I would highly recommend making one every now and then if you're going to use these. Finally, and this is for all of Germany, there is the Gedenkbuch, the memorial book, which lists the victims of the Shoah from Germany. And so here you have an example of what information you get. It's fairly detailed. Born when, maiden name, uh, where they lived, and then the history of their deportation or other things that may have happened to them. This is a fine database. It is not without errors. If you work with it and you find an error, document it and send it to them, and they will fix it. I've done that one or two times myself, and they're always happy to get corrections. I know of very few databases that work like that. Another another source of information that one might not think about is residence registration. If you've traveled in Germany, you probably stayed in a hotel where they made you fill out a form with your home address the first night of your stay. In the past, these things were regulated far more tightly, and anybody who stayed with even with private with stayed with family or friends who came from out of town would be entered, and we have the cards for a few places where these things were entered, most notably uh, Poznań or Posen, both because the collection they have goes from 1870 to 1931, and after 1918, that area was Polish already. Here is an example of one of those registration cards. If if you're lucky, this will take care of the fact that you couldn't find the vital information about certain people. Here you have an entire family, the Krakauer family, the husband Julius, the wife Clara, the son Siegfried. It tells you what their religion was, where they were born, when they were born, their occupation, and down on the right, all the places they lived in Posen. A lot of these are continued on the second page, on the other side, or on yet another card. And they will also tell you where people left for. If somebody moved to Berlin or America, or even to a town just up the road, that would be notated along with the date. Unfortunately, there are only a few towns that have these. So so you have to be lucky. Fortunately, Posen was big enough that a lot of people from elsewhere might have spent some time in Posen and would show up here. The Posen records are indexed, unlike the others. We're talking about 1 million images, by the way. And you can search them at the URL on this page. And here are some lists of, here's a list of other places you might be able to find find records of this type. Again, it's totally hit or miss, but Gdansk and Poznań are nicely covered in this regard, and those are two of the bigger cities we're talking about. That's well, those are the resources. I can no, I can only encourage you to uh, do what you can by yourself. Contact the archives in Poland. You don't necessarily need to visit them. Uh, if you know what you're looking for, you say, I want the following birth records from this for this name from this year. They will charge you a pittance for each scan, something like 50 cents. If they have to do some research for you, that'll cost you a little more, but it's generally a good deal. You write to the archive, you go back to the front page of the Polish State Archives site. They have the address of each archive on there. There's a tab called Select the Archive. You write to them, and you write to them in English. They can read English, but they will respond in Polish, so you'll have to deal with that. Uh, Again, Google Translate will probably be your friend. And if you do go, also contact them long, long before you go. Tell them what you want to see when you get there. Uh, if you can get a dialogue going with them, you'll when you arrive, you will probably find that they have pulled out things that you could not have imagined that you wanted, but that you do want. I highly recommend these folks. Most of the archives that I've worked with, they're just thrilled to have visitors, and whether by whether online visitors or in person. So I encourage you to make the most of that. That's all I have to say about how to do this stuff and where to do it. Uh, for now, do we have time left for questions, Jenny?
We do have time left. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you. Yeah.
We do have time left for questions. We have about 40 minutes and change. Um, I had one quick question, and I didn't know if you had information on it. Um, I know besides East Prussia and West Prussia, there was,
Mhm,
because the partitions of Poland were sort of
mhm.
insane at times,
Yes.
there was for a brief period of time a South Prussia and
Yes.
also a new East Prussia where my family lived until it became part of Poland again. So I
Yes.
didn't know if there were specific resources for those areas you knew about.
Um, well, prayer helps. There's not a whole lot of documentation from then. We're talking about for New East Prussia, we're talking about a 12-year period. And for South Prussia, we're talking about another few years beyond that or before that. And just getting Prussian administration, to cover the place was not easy. All of a sudden, you needed twice as many bureaucrats as you'd had before. So, establishing Jewish vital records in those places was not a top priority.
Right.
Um, they did have some plans in 1797 after the third partition. They issued a new set of laws regarding Jews that, among other things, mandated that Jews take surnames, something that had not happened for most Jews yet. It happened in the Habsburg Empire, but hardly anywhere else. They mandated surnames. Unfortunately, shortly after this law was promulgated, the king of Prussia died and a new regime came in. The new administration really didn't care about this stuff. And so we have the surname adoption documents for exactly one city. That city is Lissa, nowadays known as Leshno. Uh, and if you're lucky enough to have ancestors from there, there's some remarkable documentation online at the Polish State Archives site from there, especially for the stuff before 1812. There are very few other places that are covered have even 10% of what we have for Lissa. And again, that only goes back to 1796, I guess. Yes, the New East Prussia. It's what I was saying when Prussia held most of what is today's Poland.
Yes,
Uh,
and in
exactly
particular,
when Bialystok was Prussian. Think about it.
yes, my family comes from the town of Grajewo, which is now in northeastern Poland, and the border was only a few miles between Prussia and what became Poland. Like they were
Yeah.
very, very close. Um, so we have a number of questions. I
Okay.
don't know, would you like me to read them to you? Do you want to read them aloud and then answer them? What's your
Let's see if I
preference?
can. Let's see what happens here. Okay. Let me get back to. Here we go. The Q&A. Here we go. Okay, what do we have here? Is there a handout today? And the answer is yes. Uh, Next one, the question has been answered live. Great. Open, here we go. Open questions. Um, in addition to former East Prussia, now Poland cities like Lit, or Elk, as it's called in Polish, Rastenburg, Wartenstein, and East Prussia, now Russia, especially the towns of Tilsit, etc., etc. Um, uh, well, for interwar East Prussia, we have vital registers from, I think, 10 towns. uh, or rather, pre-1874 Jewish vital records from 10 towns, one or two of which are in the north. I have a list somewhere here. I'm not going to go fish for it, but send me an email and I'll be glad to tell you what's there, or just go over to familysearch.org. They're all online. They're the RSA films, and there are one or two towns that have substantial uh, substantial post 1874 stuff in uh, the eastern regions collection over at ancestry.com. These documents are not in English. What do I do if I don't speak Polish or German? Well, other than learning to read vital records or a few kinds of documents, uh, then, other than that, you have to find somebody who does speak or read Polish or German and work with them. Okay. Is there any general insight you can offer about surnames based on place names if we don't have first names? Yes. I should have mentioned this. This is Lars Menk's book, A Dictionary of German Jewish Surnames, Avatenu Press. This huge doorstop of a book is wonderful in that it lists every surname that appeared in any town in Germany plus Prussian Poland, uh, basically in the first half of the 18th, in the first half of the 19th century when Jews had taken surnames. Incredibly useful book. And if you look for a name, it will tell you if that name appeared in Kolberg. If Kolberg is in Posen, no, I'm sorry, Kolberg is in Pomerania. And for Pomerania, we have the surname adoption list from 1812. That is indexed in the Naldex index that Jenny mentioned earlier. It's over at Jewish Gen. Let's see. Our family includes Helen Leah Lena Lustig, born around 1800, married to Marcus Rund. Is she in your family? Well, let's find out. Oh, where are we here? There we go. I'll answer another one or two first before going digging for that. I noticed that some of the family, hi Lou, some of the family moved from Western Germany to Eastern Prussia, right, before emigrating to the U.S. Any reason they did that instead of emigrating directly from Western Germany? Uh, Jenny, you had an answer for that? This here, you want to answer the question?
Oh, sorry. No, no, no. I'm just doing it. I'm just hitting the you're answering live so that it
Okay,
says the questions get answered. I actually don't know the answer to this and would like
okay.
to learn it as well.
The answer is they probably hadn't thought about moving to America when they moved eastward. They probably moved eastward for the reasons that most Jews move, which was business. Or if you moved for a big city, it would be business and a nice big Jewish community. You would not get that in Pomerania, where again, most towns had a very small Jewish community, if at all. So they probably moved there for something that they felt was advantageous to them, and eventually decided that things were that the grass was greener all the way on the other side. The information about when someone might have emigrated from Prussia or Pomerania indexed so that it's possible to see when there was emigration, for example, to Odessa. Immigration eastward, that is to say, into the Russian Empire, was fairly rare. It was generally done for specific business purposes, such as one had an industry in Germany and one was sourcing raw goods in the East, or had set up a factory to do some of the work in the East and then shipping the partly finished goods west. It's very rare that people moved from Prussian Poland eastward, since Jews in Prussian Poland, starting in the 19th century, were, uh, and certainly all of them by 1847, were emancipated. They were citizens, unlike, say, subjects of the Tsar, who did not have, real citizen rights, equal rights, more or less equal rights to those of other people. Leave the serfs out of this for now. So when there was immigration, it probably happened on a very, on a retail basis. One family, two families, uh, moving there for a particular reason. So I don't know that there were any eastward trends that one might designate and work with in that regard. Okay. Our grandmother, Irma Tzira, was born in Milovka, Silesia. We have her father and grandfather's names. We can't seem to go back further. Tzira, could these be the... yes, definitely. Cierer is definitely a Polish spelling. It's the Polish spelling of what would be written as Tzira. You got that right, absolutely. Those would be the same people. Help me for a moment. Where's Milovka? Well, I'll have to look that one up. Okay, to the previous question about the Rund family and the Lustig family, there doesn't seem to be much crossover, much connection between the two families. There were certainly a lot of Runds in the area. They just didn't happen to marry Lustigs a lot, or are Lustigs. There are several families of Lustigs in Upper Silesia, maybe 5 or 6 different ones. Most Lustigs, by the way, are not from Upper Silesia. They're from the area between Krakow and Tarnow. Novi Sans, for instance. Tons and tons of people named Lustig from there. You meet somebody whose name is Lustig, it's a pretty good bet that they're from that region. There are Lustigs from other places, from Western Germany, from what's now Slovakia or Hungary, but that was the big concentration there.
To answer about Milovka,
Yeah.
Wikipedia, if it's the right Milovka, says it's in Silesia and it's very, very far south in Poland, in current day Poland.
And does it mention the town that it's near?
It is in the county of Zwiec, Zwywiec.
Ah, okay, okay. There's Silesia and then there's Silesia.
Okay.
This is the part of Silesia that belonged to Austria. It was not Prussian Silesia. Żywiec is there. If you're in Poland, by the way, I think Poland's largest brewery is in Żywiec, and their name is on every bottle. So you'll wind up having their beer, if nothing else. But there are quite a few records from there, and some of the records from that area are in fact held in the Katowice archive. And Katowice was Prussian Poland. It's right there on the border. So they drew the catchment area for the archive without regard for that piece of history. But at any rate, yeah, Tzira, we're talking about Yiddish, German, very similar things, and no doubt the people with that name spoke Yiddish and if they were doing any business, they also spoke German. Please recommend book titles that would trace the complicated history of Prussia, Poland, and borders. Um, Gosh, if you want it in detail, there are a couple of there's a over at Tracing the Tribe, there are a couple of guides in their guides folder that discuss uh, regions before World War One and regions after World War One. That gives you the post 1812 story or 1815 story. I consider them to be excellent, not least because I wrote them, and they basically give the details of what belonged to whom when. The good news is that between the Congress of Vienna at the end of the Napoleonic era and World War One, the borders didn't change. People say, "Oh, the borders were changing all the time." That was true between the two world wars. Before then, there was a 100-year period when the biggest change that happened was that Prussia renamed itself Germany. Uh, in the regions we're talking about, including the rest of Poland, there's one little detail on it that Krakow went from being a free city to being part of Galicia, the Austrian piece, and that happened in the 1840s. That's the only thing that changes between in that long century. So um, the next question would seem to be in Polish, which I do not speak. No, I shoot. I can give Google Translate a shot at it. Uh, uh, the the Valavians or the Pabianchi is uh, what the translation is, which boils down to I'm not sure what the question means. So anyway, the surname, book name, and author. I'll let Lars make excellent. Uh, yeah, Avotano Press. It's the only book by Lars Menck there. You may have come across Alexander Bader's books on surnames in the Russian Empire, in the Kingdom of Poland, and Galicia. This is the German companion to those. And Bader, who's Mr. Surnames, really, uh, reviewed it and said that this is how he would have done it if he had if he were qualified to do Germany. So I can highly recommend it. Lars is still out there. You have questions. Uh, Great guy. Okay. Let's see. Odessa was opened to Jews by Catherine the Great in about 1794. That is true. And as part of the establishment of the Pale, or right after it. And where most of the Jews who moved there were from elsewhere in the Pale of Settlement, which, by the way, happened also because of the partitions of Poland. All of a sudden, Russia had more territory, and it happened to be territory that was just chock full of Jews. And since the Tsars were a fairly anti-Semitic lot, uh, they decided that they'd simply set up a region where these people already lived and said, okay, you can live there, but you can't live anywhere else in Russia. And then that was in 1791, and then Odessa, I guess, was added to that. Okay. Do I know of any rabbinical archives in Posen? Answer: there must have been some. Posen's archive also took a pretty hard hit during World War II. And if there were that in there before World War II and people had their wits about them, they would have brought them to Vilna and Yivo, which then, of course, itself got brought to the Center for Jewish History. So if they exist, if there are rabbinical archives of Posen, the first place I would look would be 15 West 16th Street. Okay, I mentioned several dates of emancipation. Okay. Prussia, 1812, had been cut apart by Napoleon. All of the second and third partition stuff that they had acquired, they were relieved of again, and also anything in Western Germany, anything west of the Elbe, and Prussia held stuff all the way to the other side of the Rhine. So in 1812, those parts of Prussia that were administered by Prussia at that time saw an Emancipation Proclamation, March 11th, 1812, where Jews were given pretty much equal rights and required very few requirements were made of them. They had to take a surname if they didn't already have one, and they had to do their business and keep their books in German or another language written in the Latin alphabet. After this was at least in part because they were gearing up for the War of Liberation the next year. And by doing this, they sort of established themselves, they sort of acquired themselves a loyal and happy quartermaster corps, already, ready made. So that 1812 was for those regions. For the rest, it took until the mid 1840s for complete naturalization and the surname requirement, by the way. In Western Germany, actually, in most places that did this in 1845, about 80% of the people already had a surname and were using a surname and didn't change it. But those are the two key dates for emancipation. In Austria, a fair amount of emancipation happened around 1848 also, after which you saw a huge influx of Jews to Vienna. Those are the key dates. 1847, there was a second Emancipation Proclamation that actually stuck that time after the War of Liberation. There was a great deal of backpedaling and weaseling, and no, you had to convert first if you wanted to have a university professorship, and certain jobs weren't available to people. But things like the right to live wherever you wanted were very, very seriously established in 1812. And there were cases in the late 18 teens where Jewish communities complained to the authorities that all these Jews from elsewhere were coming to live there and it wasn't good for their business. And the authorities said, you wanted emancipation, you got emancipation. We're all playing by the same rules now. So that most of that was taken seriously between 1812 and 1847, and after 1847, most of the almost everything else was dropped. Throughout Germany, most restrictions on Jews vanished within the next 15 years after that. And before Germany was unified in 1871, the very last restrictions had dropped. Okay, let's see. Are there lots of Neumarks as towns in Posen as there are in Germany? Is Neumark a common surname? not particularly common, but certainly not, and also not necessarily Jewish. That's the trouble with German Jewish surnames; they're just like anybody else, any other German surnames for the most part. The most common surname among German Jews was Meyer. The most common surname among German Gentiles was Meyer. A whole lot more of the Gentiles, but again, you cannot draw any conclusions from half of these names. Stein, tons and tons of uh, Catholic and Protestant Steins. Uh, the One of the administrators who rewrote redid the Prussian bureaucracy, and in doing so also led to the emancipation of the Jews, was named Freiherr vom Stein. No, he wasn't Jewish. Okay, let's see. Real estate ownership records in Posen area before World War II. If there are any, and there often are, they are in the appropriate archive. Posen province, if we're talking about the Posen, the city, if they survived, they're in the Posen archive. There are other archives in Posen province, Leszno, in Gniezno, in Pua, probably even one or two out. Excuse me. And if again, if you go to the online catalog and look for the town, and then look for cadastral records or anything like that, a lot of places have them. But again, too much history happened there, so it's going to be hit or miss. My ancestor Hirsch Hammerstein is on the surname adoption list in 1814 for Tempelburg. There are several others Hammerstein from Tempelburg in the registry. Would they have been from the same family? Would they have adopted the name based on a place or for some other reason? Well, they might well have come from Hammerstein in West Prussia, where Oscar Hammerstein and Oscar Hammerstein II, their family also came from. Yeah, a lot of people choosing a surname in 1812 chose it based on a town that they had some connection with, or well, maybe even a town they had no connection with. There were some people who called themselves Pariser, and they probably hadn't been to Paris. So it's hard to read the minds of people from 200 plus years ago as to why they chose the name. There are stories around some names, and some of them might even be true, but those are very much a minority. Would most people, as to being, are they related? Could well be. They encouraged brothers, for instance, if you had several households in town, each of which had a head of household who had to choose a surname. If they were brothers or cousins or something like that, they were encouraged to choose the same surname. So again, the answer is maybe, good chance, no way of knowing directly. Would most people in Potsdam area in 1840s have spoken Yiddish? By people, I'm guessing we mean Jews. And the answer is they would probably have spoken Yiddish, but they would also have spoken German, because their emancipation, Posen was strange in this regard. They had its own rules. Again, being tied into German business culture and culture in general was very much something that the emancipation movement was striving toward. And in general, the Jews throughout Prussian Poland considered themselves Prussian and or German, far more than they might have very few of them. I've never really come across anybody who specifically identified as Polish. The exception perhaps being rabbis who took jobs wherever they got jobs, which could be in any country. Let's see. Next question. Moses Bauer, Pabianice, Poland.
I can try to answer that. I think he
Big,
means the city of Pabianice, which is very close to Łódź in the center of Poland, which
yeah.
isn't the Prussian Poland. That's my best guess from the town name, unless it's a
Okay.
small village in Prussian Poland that is spelled very similar to the city. But I've
Yeah.
been
Well.
trying to look it up and haven't found anything but the city.
Well, again, Bauer is one of those names that could appear anywhere. And in a little south of there in Galicia was a perfectly normal name because the Galician Jews tended to choose German sounding names. In Russian Poland, not so much, but again, there were plenty of people with German sounding names that were just spelled differently. My family, architect engineers, emigrated from there we go, from Breslau to Königsberg around 1800. Uh, what might have been the reason for that? Well, around 1800 is uh, the South and New East Prussia era, right around then. And if they were architect engineers, uh, they might well have gotten a uh, a commission from the Prussian state to build stuff that the Prussian state needed built in or around Königsberg. Königsberg had been Prussian all along, but why would they have moved? Again, it's usually business of some sort. Okay. My great great grandfather stated he was from a town called Hodgesch or Hodgessen in Prussia. When he's in records in America, his last name is Marx. I don't know how to research his family, as I doubt the last name was Marx. Well, that's true. Marx could have been Marcus, which was not an unusual name for Jews to choose. It would possibly be derived from Mordecai, or possibly not. Um, all I can say is look through the records for that town, see if names suggest themselves that might have any connection to it. The records from there are don't think there's a whole lot in the way of actual records there. I would check Menk's book to see, which is kind of difficult to go through because it's not organized by towns. But if you go to the M section of it and look at likely names and see which ones showed up there in that area of Posen province. Okay, anonymous attendee says there is a book written by Raphael Witkowski titled "The Jews of Poznan." This is true, um, and I really ought to read it someday. Uh, if you'd like to post a recommendation, an actual recommendation for it, that would be great too. Comment. Love the great maps. Thank you. My pleasure. Uh, any way to find lists of rabbis and chazans in West Prussia, particularly Golub, Briesen, and areas nearby? Oh, wow. To the extent that we have censuses or population lists, then you could look there because they often mention the person's profession. The 1845 surname adoption list for that particular area, which is the southeastern bit of West Prussia, does, I believe, mention uh, occupation. Don't hold me to that. And if that's the case, well, it's on. It's part of Naldex at Jewish Gen, so you can just go and I can't. I don't think you can search for rabbis, but if you go through the names of people there, you might find who you're looking for. Hazens. Don't know. That area, of course, is a little weird because that area and Upper Silesia are a little unusual in that Jews didn't necessarily live in towns the way they did throughout the rest of Prussia. In these two areas, Jews were also innkeepers, village innkeepers. And so the tiniest of villages would have one Jewish family that had bought the liquor license from the prince or whoever was selling it. And and Jews were a very popular choice for people to hold a liquor license. If nothing else, they could all read and write and keep accounts. So, other than looking through the population lists, I can't think of any. I don't. Well, actually, I take it back. For rabbis, there is the German dictionary of rabbis. It's in German. It is available as a PDF somewhere. I have a copy, and as a PDF, it's searchable. So you could probably look for the town names you're interested in. Do various Marcuse families trace back to a seminal Marcuse? Well, yeah, if you want to call Mordechai himself, um, that seminal Marcus often derives from the name Mordechai, um, and was a popular surname in all kinds of different places. Uh, so a seminal Marcuse in Prussia, probably not, because all over Germany, all over that part of the world, really, Jews had to choose their surnames mostly at the same time, and were not necessarily in contact with their cousins 500 miles away to determine just which surname we were all going to choose, especially since they were often living in well, different principalities and so on. Uh, so Marcuse was it's based on a given name. So again, that can really happen anywhere. Uh, Again, if you look in Lars Menk's dictionary, you will see a list of places where the name Marcuse popped up early. For the person asking about Newmark, or indeed anyone researching Newmark, please email the person at that email address.
So we are just about 2 minutes to go to the 90-minute mark. So I think if you want to, we can wrap up now, Roger.
Okay.
Unless you would like, I know there's one question left, but I don't know whether you answered that. It's um, the best place to look for records from Chodziz and Margonin.
Okay. Marketing, there's not a whole lot from the town itself. In terms of vital records, there may be something, other types of records. You'd have to go to the Polish State Archives site or to those inventory books that I mentioned earlier, volume one of the Polish set. And just look in the index under Margotin and see wherever there's an item uh, that has something to do with Margotin. That's all I can say. For Hutchison, oh God. Um, uh, Let me know. Hold on just a second here. Um, Apologies, I did not put my email on the first page. I'm going to have to read it to you now. But please send me questions. My email is my name, Roger dot Lustig at verizon.net. I apologize for not having that in clickable form, but uh, again, I will be glad to answer your questions. Will there be a recording of this I could watch? I believe there is.
Yes. I'm sorry, I am on here. I am unmuted.
Oh,
Apologies.
one more,
There is a
one.
recording. It takes about 48 hours for our webmaster to process the recording and encode it. Then he will send it to YouTube and post it onto the center's website. So at that point, our development team will send you all a link to the recording with the captions as done by YouTube. And then approximately 2 to 3 weeks from then, if you are hard of hearing, the captions will be corrected to actually reflect what people are saying because the ones on YouTube, because they're automated, not entirely accurate.
Finally, looking for information on family from the town of Sanok. But does it mean that there are no village records from that town in the Polish records? Is there anything I can say about Sanok? All I can say is that it was in Galicia. That is to say, the part of Poland that was held by Austria. That is to say, not Prussian Poland. So you're asking the wrong person. If there are no records from that town, what does it mean? Go to JRI Poland, find out who is the coordinator or the town leader for that town, and ask them. Because if there's anything to be known about Sanok and documentation about it, they will know it.
And also a shout out to Gesher Galicia, who
Yes, also,
specializes in the Galicia region, and they
yes,
may either have articles in their journal, which is all, if you become a member, it's all archived on their
yes,
website, or they may have they have inventories of what records do exist for each town.
right. And then there's still the Jewish Gen Family Finder, where you find other people who are looking for stuff from Sanok, possibly even with the surname you're looking for. Uh, there's over 1 million people registered at Jewish Gen, and many of them have registered their interests in the Jewish Gen Family Finder. Some people will answer your query if you make one, some people won't. It doesn't cost much to make that query, and it doesn't cost much even to put your interests in there so that people can find you. The more people do that, the more useful that resource is. So cast your bread upon the waters or something like that.
Stephanie, I think the last one we'll answer is Stephanie would like to know your email address again, which is roger.lustig
That's Lustig,
at verizon.net.
right?
And I wanted to thank you and everyone for joining us today. I apologize for the technical difficulties that prevented some of you from coming in on time. We will work to resolve those and not have it for our next lecture, which is about Galicia, actually. And it's by Johannes Chakai, who is a German PhD who's giving the lecture from Israel in April. And he will be talking about the adoption of surnames in Jewish Galicia and what it says about the family's background.
Yes, that's going to be an interesting one because Galicia was part of the Austrian Empire, part of the Habsburg Empire when surnames were adopted, and that means that they went first.
And
That's
this is
where that's where surname adoption started.
Yes, and this is Johannes's, he spent his time doing his PhD on this, so he's very
Okay,
well versed in the
yeah,
research.
great. And when is this?
It's April 28th. It's at 1 p.m. because he is in Israel, so with the time difference, we put it earlier in
Okay,
the day. So he's not giving a lecture at midnight. And
okay.
it will also be
I want to hear
recorded.
that one. I certainly want to hear that one.
So it's April 28th
Yeah.
at
Thank you
1
very
p.m.
much, everybody, for listening, and thanks for asking great questions, and thanks in advance for anything you can send me.
And thank you all for joining us.